So Juntos is a service organization that does service work in Pittsburgh and abroad in Nicaragua. And the idea of the organization is to try to connect both places through workshops that inspires young students to think about culture and think about like their community in a critical way.
Juntos is a student service organization. We were founded in 2007, and we do what its members almost kind of like are interested in, like both what its members want to do and also like what the communities that we work with are interested in us doing.
It is essential that the student acquire understanding of and a lively feeling for values. He must acquire a vivid sense of the beautiful and of the morally good. He must learn to understand the motives of human beings, their illusions and their sufferings, in order to acquire a proper relationship to the individual fellow men and to the community.
Service and learning are necessary components for social change, but in order to be successful, the innovators had to be passionate about their work. Albert Einstein always believed that people should continue to study and work for what they are passionate for, no matter what it is. While Einstein cared for science and political issues in the time of World War II, he was always open to other ways of helping a cause. Rachel Carson would agree with this, as she was a firm believer in art acting as a means of social change. In Silent Spring, she used her creative skills to spark a change in the country concerning environmental issues. In Juntos, art is also used to spark change through murals and art classes in the village they visit, Rosa Grande, and also in Pittsburgh.
One of our alumni, Courtney Whittigan, he was like really interested in art and how art can be used to like spark social change and also just like use art as a way of communicating between like different groups or different people that wouldn't have a means of speaking.
In Pittsburgh, we conduct arts workshops with underserved communities and students from those communities to introduce them to Nicaragua and the ideas of cultural difference and equip them with ways of talking about cultural difference in like in an informed way and in a non-judgmental way.
She understood her activism as part of a larger struggle to empower those who had been marginalized, not only women, but also everyday citizens whose voices were disregarded in what Carson called an era of specialists. Nico Slade on Rachel Carson.
Gandhi and Parks were both involved in movements that worked towards raising human rights in their region as their overall goal. Within their bigger goals, the movements also empowered some that previously had not been viewed as equal. Gandhi proved that the lower classes had power in numbers, even without wealth, and also gave women roles in the movement. Both are radical moves, but essential to the success of each movement. In the civil rights movement, women played a large role and were more empowered. Although actively working towards equality in races, gender equality was also necessary. Adelaide made some observations about how this gap had not been changed in Nicaragua.
I noticed that young girls were much more reserved than they were here. They were like very shy and sort of just giggled a lot like when you would talk to them, whereas the young guys like were very like, you know, tell me about yourself, like tell me where you're from, and like the people the same age, how they, and I noticed this also when I went to Ghana, like it's like just a different way, just like a different standard on how young women should behave. I think it's just maybe more conforming to like certain gender norms and like different expectations for how women should behave. So, you know, like women being very demure.
Patiently, day by day, year by year, Parks worked to create the institutions, the networks, the community that made the bus boycott possible. Nico Slate on Rosa Parks.
Although the inequality in gender is still apparent, political changes have empowered the lower class some. Nicaragua is still the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, but the chances for small businesses to grow have increased.
We also do have the education initiative in Nicaragua, which taps into this small computer cluster that exists in the community at the school. And so the community had four or five laptops donated to them, but there really isn't a lot of human capital in terms of understanding or being familiar with how to tap into computers as a resource. So this was something that the community members asked of us to help them with. So last year we delivered 3 workshops to school teachers and school affiliated individuals from the community that desire, that need that they had.
He began by saying that all social work must be undertaken in a spirit of utter humility and self-sacrifice.
Although the political changes helped, the passion of the community to better themselves is what helps the most. Andrew Carnegie found his success through connections and self-initiative. Later, he also worked to spread education by building libraries in a university. The village of Rosa Grande is always looking to learn more from others and have found success through the connections they can make with organizations like Juntos and Bridges.
I think like a lot of times what happens with international service is you sort of think of the people that you're helping as like other, you know, or like apart from you, or somehow less than in a way, and you're almost like you're this benevolent person who's come to help them and come to save them, or like, you know, come to like better their community and better their world. And I think Juntos really tries to emphasize that like we aren't like saviors, or like we aren't like we're doing things and we're doing good, but we also can fail and we also can do as much harm as we can do good. And I think that we try to have a consciousness about service and like help the group think more about what it means to serve, and what it means especially to serve internationally, like a community that's very different from, well, not even very different, like, you know, just even thinking like there are cultural differences, but they're still human, we're still the same, like, you know, we're like trying to learn from each other and trying to like communicate with each other. So I think that's what makes Juntos different, is like that perspective of trying to see with the community rather than for them.
I think that the way that we approach service, definitely from like an understanding kind of perspective, or we seek to understand before we do anything else, rather than come up with project ideas that we think will benefit the community. We very much are diligent about making sure that we talk to the we communicate with the community about different needs that they have, so that then like when they bring those needs to the table, or those desires, then we can kind of negotiate what we have the skills to do. Or we truly try to emphasize understanding the culture and the history, particularly the historical relationships between Nicaragua and the U.S. Again, as a way of informing yourself about the context that you're going to enter for the next 7 days, and also just so that you can become more of like an invested individual and have a more well-rounded experience through conversations that you have with people. When I was on the ground and talking to people, it definitely makes a huge difference when you talk to them from like an informed perspective, because it demonstrates that you are more invested in the experience.
So we have found some connections between these figures in history, but what connects them all to each other? It wasn't how they went through the movement, as Gandhi fasted and empowered people to peacefully protest, while Carnegie simply donated organizations to society. And even though Gandhi and Einstein communicate some, most of these figures never met in person. It had nothing to do with their background either, as Gandhi came from a well-off family while Parks did not. But there is one connection between Andrew Carnegie, Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein, Rosa Parks, and Rachel Carson: their understanding of events they were passionate about during their lifetime. You see, in order to teach others, you have to first understand the material really well and be able to communicate it effectively. These leaders in history were immersed in their cause and willing to spend their life finding the most effective way to help. They had to understand the background, methods of protest and support, and the people they were working with. Like Juntos, they knew that understanding who and how to help was crucial. Their role in these causes wasn't a small part of their life. It took years. Visiting Rosa Grande and Juntos isn't a 10-day trip. It's a year or 4 years immersed in bettering their understanding of the people in Nicaragua and how they can best help this community grow in any way that 10 college students can help the most.
If I were not willing to sacrifice myself for the cause of peace, what should I sacrifice for? What was I good for? Andrew Carnegie.